Welcome to China Tech Talk, a weekly discussion of what's happening in China's technology and startup ecosystems. I'm John Artman, editor-in-chief at TechNode.
And I'm Matthew Brennan, founder of ChinaChannel.co.
So last week we talked a little bit about bike sharing, and there's obviously a lot more to talk about in that area. But first we want to kind of step aside a little bit and look at another very hot area, another really interesting area, what's happening in Chinese technology. So if you're interested in bike sharing, don't worry, we're going to come back to that. But for this episode, for the second episode of China Tech Talk, we want to talk about WeChat mini programs. And so I think that, if you're living in China, you're already pretty much aware of WeChat. More than likely, you use it all the time. If you're outside of China, perhaps you don't know too much about it, but you do know it's a messaging app that's really kind of taken China by storm. Started in 2011. And at this point, it's completely ubiquitous. If you're not on WeChat, if you live in China and you're not on WeChat, you might as well just not exist in the digital age. So we're going to be talking a little bit about mini programs on WeChat this week because as Matthew is going to tell us, this really is a game changer for technology, for consumption here in China. So Matt, you've actually written quite a bit about mini programs, and I think that you were one of the people when it was first announced to really get excited about these things. So what exactly are they?
So mini program is the original name for mini programs were app accounts. So they're a kind of an account on WeChat that mostly businesses can use. And we can think of them as a light app, a very small and fast application that pops up and disappears once you've used it. They're not called apps anymore. Now they're called mini programs. So this is a point that I want to bring up early on, that a lot of people refer to them as mini apps. It's a bit like the bike sharing thing that we had last episode, where you made your point about bike sharing perhaps being a bit inaccurate. So here, the term that Tencent and WeChat will always use for these is mini programs. They will never refer to them as apps, and that is because of Apple. Apple does not allow them to use the word app, did not allow them when they had a meeting at the beginning. So that's a little confusing for some people. That's basically what they are. We can think of them as light and small, and they're sort of ethereal, I guess is the word, where they sort of come and go, disappear quite quickly.
The app versus program distinction. It's funny because the word app wasn't really used until smartphones really became the norm for people, and basically, applications on your smartphone are the exact same thing as applications on your desktop. I think that when apps were first released, when developers first started using them and started creating them, they wanted to differentiate them from what you have on your desktop. And so what we're seeing now is basically the same kind of semantic split, where to make sure that people are not, confusing, the apps that reside on your phone and the apps that reside inside of WeChat. So everyone knows that they're different now. On TechNode, we end up calling them mini apps, just because that's what we've kind of always called them, and so we want to make sure that we stay consistent there. But at the end of the day, mini app, mini program. The official name is mini program. In part, because, as you said, because of Apple. But at the end of the day, it's basically, it means the same thing.
Right. I think that's a really valid point. And that's why Pony Ma, the CEO of Tencent, indicated that, okay, Apple said we can't use apps, but actually that's probably a good thing overall. Perhaps they didn't think that at the beginning. But it is because of this semantic split, which I think is actually useful in terms of understanding what's going on here. If we're calling them apps, that is, I think mini programs will go in a different direction from what we know apps are as right now. So it could actually be very useful to stop using this term app, which is very much a term that's associated with Apple. And it's not going to be the future of the future of mini programs, and the direction they'll take is likely to be somewhat. It could be very different from the what apps are right now and what people think of when they think of apps.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is one of the reasons that that you're so bullish on them. But I want to go back to one of the points that you made before about these mini programs being ephemeral. So I guess one of my big questions is what is the difference between these mini programs and an HTML5 web app? I mean, is it basically the same thing? And so you're just accessing an H5 page through WeChat, or is there actually a difference there?
I think they're very different. A HTML5 page that's been around for a long time. The difference in mini programs is a big difference is they're bookmarked within WeChat. If you use a mini program, you can come back to it. Right now, most users aren't used to that process, but this is a sort of habit that's built over time. So if you use a mini program and you want to come back to it, it's 2 taps to get back to a list of your mini programs, from where you can re-access that mini program. I think it's about discovery mechanisms. So that's one of the discovery mechanisms, or one of the sort of areas through which you can access a mini program. And because WeChat has this whole ecosystem built up, and they're so bullish, and they're pushing mini programs so much now, they're creating all these different ways that you can access mini programs. So, for example, you can put them into articles now. You can link them to official accounts menus. You can link them to official account, homepage directly. Pretty soon there'll be mini programs nearby, which will be sort of we're not sure exactly how that feature will work, but based on your location, you'll be able to find different mini programs. All these different ways in which you can find mini programs, and of course the QR code, which is the big one, right? The QR code in the real world, so scanning that to open up a mini program. Within the context of finding a bike, for example, or having just paid for a coffee in Starbucks. A big one is linking mini programs to that pay screen. So once you've paid something for something with WeChat Pay, then there'll be an option on that. You've paid 5 yuan for your Coca-Cola. Then now there's a mini program linked to that page to upsell you on something, or to provide a delivery service for what you've just bought, for example. Usually when we buy things, there's some kind of extra add-on service that we might want, and so this can be provided through a mini program directly linked to the page you get when you've actually just made that purchase. So the potential here is absolutely huge, and to be honest, in terms of the features and functionalities available for mini programs right now, they're not majorly different from what WeChat already had with official accounts, or what's possible if you are good at working with WeChat APIs and linking together to a HTML5 page. But in the future, that's likely to change. There's likely to be a lot more interesting things that the WeChat team will open up for mini programs that won't be available for other features and entities on the platform.
Yeah, and this is what's been really interesting, I think, about these mini programs. I remember when mini programs started to get really hyped up. Tencent, they had been rumored that they were going to be introducing these things. Then there was actual confirmation that they were going to be releasing them. And a lot of developers, a lot of marketers were getting very excited because it's like, oh, okay, finally we can be released from the shackles of our, official account. We can be released from the shackles of our service account and actually start doing something a bit more interesting, or at least exploring different other ways to interact with customers or your audience or whatever. But then when they were actually released, there was a bit of a letdown, a bit of a disappointment. Where, and I remember, being in some of the WeChat groups with you, Matt, where, people were sharing these mini programs. And you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is an interesting application of these mini programs, but it's not compelling. Like, it's not an actual use case that I'm interested in. And it seemed like that was kind of quite a bit of the feedback at the time, that there wasn't actually a compelling scenario for people to actually be interested in using these, to actually create a habit, as you mentioned, out of using these things. But then I was looking back, when WeChat announced that they were going to be introducing advertisements into the to the Moments timeline, that there was a lot of negative feedback. People were complaining about it. That they were getting served ads that weren't interested to them. They're just a regular dude living in a third tier city, not making too much money, but then they're being served these ads for like Gucci bags or something like that. And I feel like in some ways, Tencent, they are, at least, well, with WeChat, they seem to be like the kings of a failed launch. I mean, you look at how many programs worked, how they launched them, and it wasn't what it could have been was not actually fully fleshed out. And I think in a sense, Tencent can actually do that because of their dominance. Because of WeChat's dominance, they can say, okay, here's this really cool thing. We haven't quite figured it out yet. You guys go play with it. We're going to keep developing it. And then, a point that you've made before, 2 years later is really kind of when we see that they've really kind of come into their own.
Everything that WeChat has launched on day one that's gone on to be really, really good and really, really important, when it was launched, was crap. Everything. WeChat Pay. Yeah. When it was launched, it worked, but nobody was using it. So it was useless. Right? There's nobody getting hyped about WeChat Pay for offline payments in stores on day one. It took 2.5 years for that to happen. And now WeChat Pay is ubiquitous across China. You can go into any store and use WeChat Pay. And that's a habit that's taken a long time to build. When you look at official accounts, the whole official accounts platform, which is in China almost as important as the app economy itself, when it started, was crap. It just had some very basic features. It was used by celebrities to post audio messages to their fans. When you look at WeChat app itself, when it's 1.0 version, it was just a basic messaging app. You could send pictures, you could send text. That was it. It was very, 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 very basic when it started out. The list goes on and on, right? So every feature that's gone on to be huge started from a very humble beginning. What's different here is that before this feature was released, Pony Ma, the CEO of Tencent, and Alan Zhang, the founder of WeChat, have both been on the record talking a lot about this feature as if it's a big deal. And that's never happened before. Usually they just launch features and they're surprising people. That's their style. And this one was different. This one was literally the founder of WeChat got up on a stage and said, I have a dream, and that dream is mini programs. That's pretty much what he said. Yeah, to summarize his talk in a sentence. I had a dream, and that dream is mini programs. And they were launched deliberately on the 10th anniversary of the launch of the iPhone. Founder of WeChat, again, on his moments, posted some pictures that, again, indicated that he saw this as a career-defining moment. as in like, this is the big idea I've had. This is as big as the iPhone. This is as big as the App Store, this idea. And then, they've never done that. They've never done anything like that. So everyone was expecting, oh my God, like WeChat's like, this is the big one, this is the big one. And they're waiting for it. And then when it came out, it was very disappointing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, like I was kind of like looking back, and really, like I said before, it really kind of felt like a failed launch. And at the same time, I think Tencent can get away with that because WeChat is already so dominant, and and there's really very few actual competitors. If you look at there was a report published earlier this year by the Cheetah Labs, as well as Libra, which is an Android market analysis platform. And so they did a ranking of the top 15 social apps in 2016. And they ranked it by weekly active penetration rate and then weekly app openings per capita. Number one was WeChat at 80%. Weekly active penetration rate. Number two was QQ, also owned by Tencent, at a little bit under 50%. And number three is Weibo at 7.5%. And so you look at those numbers, and it's very, very clear that there's no one even close to coming to touching the dominance of WeChat in China's social media. And so in a sense, it was a bit of a failed launch, but it hasn't really hurt them, it seems, at the end of the day, and they are continuing to innovate on top of the WeChat the mini programs.
It hasn't hurt them because they're always a couple of reasons. Like that WeChat's so careful about the user experience. They launched this feature, but if for most users, the main problem is not that I don't like mini programs. It's like, what are mini programs? I've never seen one. Right? It's not a user like so. Weibo. Let's take Weibo as an example, which you just referenced. So they launched, they ripped off Snapchat, which everyone's been doing recently. Yeah. So they've put in stories, right? Which is basically every Facebook product now has stories in it, and Weibo is doing it now. When you launch that, it's in the user's face. They're like, oh, the app's changed. Now I have to, what is this thing? Whoa, hang on. And every user will get that, right? The day it's launched. But WeChat doesn't take that approach. They've launched what they consider to be a game-changing feature, but for most users, the experience of using the app has not changed at all. So the way it's hard to explain if you don't use WeChat how they do that actually, but there's a lot of things like that in WeChat.
Well, I was going to say, because that's something that you mentioned before. One of the biggest complaints at the launch was about discovery, and so I think you make a really good point. I mean, in general, if you look at WeChat, the user interface compared to almost any other website or application in China, it's amazingly clean. Like all you have really is you have your messages, and then you have some tabs, below that where you can go into moments and have a bit more of a interact on a bit more of a public scale. And then there's other features where you can access, but there's no advertisements, there's no pop-ups. All it is just open the app and you go into your messages. Open the app and you can go into your moments. And with some advances in actual smartphone technology, so for example on the iPhone 6s and above, there's a 3D touch feature where you can press a little bit harder on your home screen, and things will pop up, shortcuts to payment, to your QR code, where you can get your where someone can add you and scan your QR code and then add you onto their contact list. But again, in general, the UI is amazingly clean compared to a lot of other Chinese applications and websites. And so I agree that they've done a really good job and very strict about protecting that user experience. But then when you look at mini programs, they're almost impossible to find, and they're very difficult to find inside the actual application. And then even then, like once you have used a mini application, it's not always very clear about, okay, where do I go to find it again? And it seems like in some ways they've almost done that on purpose to kind of keep it a bit low key.
Definitely. They don't want the users to be bothered by this. To summarize about the WeChat experience being totally different from other apps in China, when you open WeChat, you get a page that is the blue marble page. It's a picture of the globe with what seems to be a young boy looking up at the world. That's the open screen. That's the loading screen. Almost every other major app in China, the loading screen is an advert. It's an advert that changes. For some product that usually you don't want, and you have to look at it for 5 seconds. It has a countdown. That, for me, summarizes the difference between WeChat and most Chinese apps. They're thinking on a completely different level to most other people. Now, for mini programs being discoverable, it's changing. It's changing very, very fast. In fact, almost I feel that by the time we've recorded this and by the time we actually get it out to release, there could be more changes that happen. Because right now, mini programs are going through a period of almost unprecedented, rapid new features being launched day by day. I refer to it as the mini programs blitzkrieg, which is what WeChat's currently going through right now. This is unprecedented. We've never seen WeChat release so many features in such a short space of time. Now we're starting to see the actions happen that all the talk before everyone was saying, oh, there's lots of talk and no action on behalf of Tencent and WeChat, and now we're seeing a lot of action finally. It's changing extremely fast, and I think brands and businesses now are getting very excited about this.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, like I would say that why I kind of classify it as a bit of a failed launch. I mean, because and the way it was sold was that, in terms of discoverability, the only way, one of the main ways that you could actually find these mini programs was, by scanning a QR code in the physical world. So, and it seems to me that the applications there are super, super interesting for businesses and brands to allow, as you mentioned before, upselling, but then also just other ways of delivering content or delivering messages to their users. And so, and that type of functionality just wasn't really there at the time because companies just didn't have any of that in place. And so I think that, moving forward, we are going to see a much larger uptick in the numbers of physical QR codes that you can scan to actually access the mini programs. And I think that's really what's kind of so compelling for me, is it's really kind of bringing the O2O trend, the O2O economy, kind of full circle, where O2O, technically it stands for online to offline, and we can talk more about that at some other point. But here, what we're seeing with the mini programs is, again, closing that loop. So it's not just online to offline, but you're scanning a QR code and you're being presented with online content. And so it's offline to online. So the reverse of that trend. And so really, I mean, this is the really cool thing about technology these days, is that at this point, when you're talking about anything that's happening in the world, it's almost impossible to disentangle the effects of technology on any given phenomenon. And so even this idea of O2O, online to offline, offline to online, even this idea is becoming unnecessary. Everything is connected. And many programs seem to be the way that WeChat and Tencent are kind of trying to bridge that gap in terms of actually bringing it all in together into one package.
Exactly. The online and offline worlds are seamless now. In China, they're seamless in many ways. So this trend is going to keep growing and growing. We're still at very early days in terms of offline to online experiences in particular. but the trend is very, very clear, and that is what many programs are trying to capture. Yeah, it's trying to break down the friction. That's what it's at its core. What many programs are. And I think I want to go into more detail about it actually in part two of this, because what's going on in terms of mini programs on a very, very high level is that they're trying to reduce the friction to have these interactions from your basically what now your phone. Your phone is the equipment you're using, but in the future it might not be. It could be glasses, it could be something else. But right now it's the phone, and the interactions between your phone and the real world, in order for you to do things like unlock a door or make a payment, use something or interact with someone. The barriers are being broken down here, and the current system that WeChat has in place previously, which was official accounts, this is a very unnatural an unnatural sequence. It's a very clunky sequence in order for you to have these interactions. And basically what many programs are doing is reducing the friction and simplifying that whole process.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a later episode, kind of looking into the business model, diving in a little bit deeper into how content creators and brands can use them. And then perhaps even looking at, the future of the internet. How is this going to play in with, the Internet of Things? How is this going to play in with, some of the bigger trends that we're seeing right now in terms of the sharing economy and things like that. But unfortunately, we're at about time for this episode. And so in the future, look forward to more talk about mini programs and WeChat. And we're also going to get back to bike sharing in the next few episodes as well. So as always, thank you so much for listening. If you really enjoyed this program, as we hope you did, please do us the kindness of leaving a review on iTunes, or giving us a thumbs up, or sharing it on your social network, sharing it, telling all your friends about it. But anyway, that's about all the time that we have. I'm John Artman for TechNode.
And I'm Matt from China Channel.
That's when you say I'm Matt.
Okay, I'm Matt. Yeah.
Just go ahead and say I'm Matt from China Channel or something.
And I'm Matt from.